Hello and welcome to the Not All Electronic Signature Platforms Are Created Equal webinar. I am Marilyn Wilson from the Wave Group, one of the partners of that firm. And Wave Group is a consulting firm that works with lots of associations, brokerages, MLSs, and agents, helping them to decide and to define the best technology solutions in their business. So we're really excited today to talk to you about the electronic signature world. It is one of the most exciting innovations that we've seen come along a long time. It's making the whole process of real estate much more efficient, much easier to transact business with people that are all over the world and all over the country, to make things happen more quickly and more efficiently. And we're here to tell you some really interesting things about that today. I'm going to introduce our panelists in just a minute. But before I do that, what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of a backdrop about why we all should be so excited about electronic signatures. So if Ken, can you flick to the first slide that shows the survey that we did? That would be terrific. So we did some research with the Houston Association of Realtors, just about a year ago now, and they were really interested in finding out about how big are electronic signatures from a consumer perspective, because of course the consumer is really ultimately who drives the real estate industry. And what we saw, and this is again almost a year ago now, we saw that almost 40% of the people in that market specifically were using electronic signatures in their transactions. So it's a very popular, and my guess is if we did this again, it would be even higher than that. It's becoming almost a standard of excellence for consumers. They all kind of expect it now because they just find it to be much more efficient and much easier for them to do, and of course much more readily available in terms of understanding what they signed and when they signed it. So if you can flip to the next slide, Ken. And this one was really the one that we thought was exciting. So about almost two-thirds, actually a little bit more than two-thirds, believe that it was an extremely valuable part of the process, that it really made it easier for them to transact business. It made it easier for them to keep track of all of the reports and disclosures and things that they signed. So there's a clear interest coming from consumers on this, and every time we talk to consumer research panels, which we do all the time, we hear clearly that this is one of the most important and most exciting innovations that real estate has brought to the industry in a long time. And frankly, in some respects, consumers may even be a little bit ahead of realtors on this. They may be even asking realtors. We hear that they do that all the time. So it's something as a brokerage or as an MLS or as an association or even as an individual agent, it's one way to truly improve the level of customer service that you provide to the clients that you work with. So if we can flip to the next slide, please. So today's webinar is really all about educating those that are on the call. We've invited actually two different technology companies that provide a very similar service to the table. And the reason is that they both have taken a very serious look at the best and most secure ways to deliver electronic signatures. They both recognize, as does Wave Group, and I'm sure many of you, that legal contracts are very important in our business, and we want to be sure that we're doing the right thing, and that we're providing tools to our customers that are ultimately going to help protect our interest as well as theirs. So this survey, or this webinar today is really to talk about how to ensure that electronic signature solutions truly are legally viable, and to help you better understand the questions to ask when you may be choosing a solution or when you're just making sure that the solution that you're using is appropriate. And how to help better understand how to evaluate those programs. So what are the kinds of questions that we should ask? What are the kinds of elements that are most important in an electronic signature? And it gets kind of complicated, I got to tell you. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and a lot of the things that need to be done here truly are things that have to be protected legally. And so you really have to know the kinds of questions to ask to be able to really do the right thing. So that's really what this is about today. And I'm going to quickly, if we can, introduce the folks that are going to be talking to you today. If we could flip to the next slide. First, we have Tom Gonzer, and he's actually the founder of DocuSign, a really interesting guy that's been doing lots of different technologies for quite a while. He actually started in the wireless business, and he actually worked for Apple for a while as well. And he's done a variety of programs that are related. He actually ran one of the largest transaction management systems for the mortgage industry called NetUpdate before he started DocuSign. So he has a deep level of understanding of how real estate transactions work, what types of disclosure, what types of contracts, what types of information are required, and then the best ways to protect that data and to sign them effectively. We flip to the next one. Next, we have Ken Moyle, who's the Chief Legal Officer and Vice President of Legal and Corporate Affairs for DocuSign. I don't have to tell you that he's a lawyer with that title. He joined DocuSign back in 2006 and has been involved with a lot of their growth over the last couple of years. But he also has worked in the courtroom and in the boardroom. He works in both business opportunities as well as making sure that the DocuSign products are ahead of government and regulatory trends. So he's going to be talking to us a lot today about the kinds of things that he knows are coming. You can see also that he's very involved with the ESRA, which is a Washington-based program for the Electronic Signatures and Records Association. So he's very involved with all of the latest legislation, not just in real estate, but across all industries. Next, please. Next, we have Martin Scrokey, and he's the CEO of Instanet. And Instanet has been in the electronic signature business for a long time as well. And they provide a sort of an end-to-end solution with forms, document management, transaction management, as well as electronic signatures. He's been in the real estate business for many, many years, has worked with many of the largest associations and MLSs in the country, and also brings a strong expertise in the best ways to provide high-quality electronic signature solutions. And certainly last but not least, we have, if you flip the chart, we have Russ Bergeron. And Russ is the CEO of MRED, the Midwest Real Estate Data, one of the largest MLSs in the country. They serve over 40,000 agents and brokers across the Chicagoland area. And he's extremely involved not only with the MLS space. He actually used to run one of the largest MLSs in California as well. He's on the board of the directors of the Council of MLS. He's on the board of RESO, which is the group that's really trying to create data standards across the industry. And he also serves on advisory capacity for Realtor.com, Trulia, Supra, and CoreLogic and Realist. So he's extremely involved in the business as well, and one of the best MLS leaders out there. So that's the group that we're going to be talking to today. And if you flip to the next slide, we can get into the questions. So I thought first it would be helpful for us to just talk about the electronic industry, our electronic signature business and what's happening with it. And I thought maybe I'll start with you, Martin. What do you see is why have electronic signatures become so popular? It seems like over the last 12 to 18 and even 24 months that we've seen them kind of go crazy. Can you tell us from your perspective why you think that is?
Sure. I'd just like to say good afternoon, and thanks for having me on. One of the biggest reasons we see is exactly what you went to before. The consumer expectations. Today's consumer, they live their personal and business life online, and they transact pretty much everything from a social aspect to a business aspect through online services. So they expect to be able to sign contracts, transact any kind of real estate sale through an online service and with electronic signatures. And what we've seen is, kind of to the point that you were talking to, is they've, lack of a better term, dragged the realtor community into a quicker stance to adopting the use of this technology. And what we're seeing is more and more realtor associations, boards, MLSs, brokers, and individuals are adopting the use of electronic signatures in their daily usage tools to help facilitate a transaction. It just makes the process faster, more convenient for the consumer, and in the end, it saves a whole bunch of time and money for both the consumer and more so for the realtor in terms of how they transact their business. They can get in and get out and do business faster and spend the time selling real estate instead of working with technology.
That's great. And Russ, is the head of one of the largest MLSs. You offer a series of tools you call public service applications, and would you kind of put this kind of a tool in that category? Maybe you could explain what that public service apps concept is and how you believe that this might fit within that.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for the invite. I know you were sorry that President Obama had to back out, but I'll try to fill in.
He was too busy with Spencer, sorry.
But definitely, yeah, this would fall under the public service app umbrella, if you will. We introduced DocuSign, probably 18 to 20 months ago into our system. And our MLS system already had a document repository and a transaction management component. So we made sure that we integrated the DocuSign deeply into that part of the system. So in just the first year, we had 42,000 envelopes processed through DocuSign. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean each of those is a unique transaction because we process around 100,000 deals per year. But it does show that it was quickly accepted and easily assimilated into the offer and closing process.
Interesting. Okay, so it sounds like it would, you know, can you give us any perspective on how much of, like how big an involvement does that seem like relative to some of the other technologies that you offer? That seems like it's really high compared to what we see in some other types of things.
Oh, yeah, compared to some of the products that we offer, the usage on this is huge, and it was a very quick ramp up too. It didn't take long to get people using this on a regular basis. So the demand, I think, is there, and I think Martin mentioned it. If the realtors aren't demanding it, the consumers definitely are.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, and I don't know if you suffer from this in your market, Russ. I don't believe you do, but I know that some markets have very dominant positions with large brokers who are very concerned that MLSs offer products that they believe level the playing field. In other words, they somehow negate the advantage, the technology advantage that large companies may be able to afford. And from what I've heard, in most markets where that's an issue, it doesn't appear as though electronic signatures is perceived as one of those things. It's perceived more as business transaction efficiency, which is not necessarily competitive advantage. It's just something that makes all of realtors' lives better. Do you kind of hear the same thing from your brokers in your market, or?
Absolutely, yeah. They see this as, because it touches everyone. I mean, the whole transaction model is difficult because if people have different desktops for different transaction systems, it can become cumbersome. But at least in this case, the signing process and the security of the documents is taken care of at a central location. So they much prefer this method to any other that's out there.
Gotcha. Is there any when you're thinking about having electronic signatures, have you had any good successes in certain ways of communicating or marketing the idea to your realtors to get more adoption, just for the advice of those that are on the call, brokers or MLSs that are trying to get more people to try it, or any suggestions about how to make that work?
Well, we have probably 15 different vehicles that we communicate with our members with. And we promote it as a product of the week every so often. We have big rollout plans. DocuSign was at our recent MRED Palooza where we had 5,000 people attend our trade show. And what's nice about a DocuSign or digital signatures is that, as you mentioned, it's highly popular right now. People want to hear about it. They want to make their transactions more efficient because, if they can get that deal done more quickly, they're going to get more deals done, and they're going to get paid more quickly. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Gotcha. And just one more question on how it's being used, and maybe this is one for you, Martin. Where and when do you see electronic signatures being used? Are they being used throughout the transaction, or are you seeing any changes in where people are using them in the process?
Definitely. Initially, we started to provide this almost 10 years ago, and we would see just single forms, a contract, an addendum, not even being grouped together with the transaction. And now what we're seeing...
Hey, are you here somewhere?
Tremendous growth. We see it starting right from the listing agreement. So people are able to go in, sit with the consumer, get the listing agreement
Liz sent me a bunch of CEO calls.
And then
Victor?
be able to go right through to the end of the transaction with all the other forms, amendments, contracts, counteroffers, and such, to the point where we're seeing that the usage has just gone through the roof. We're expecting, well, we surpassed 2012's usage, the number of signings created and consummated in our system in May, and we expect to be about 140% higher this year by the end. The market is very active from what we can see in the activity, but this far surpasses the increase in the activity. People are signing documents basically from the start of the transaction all the way down to the end, and they're covering anywhere from a 40-page set of documents up to some clients are signing 260, 360 page groups of documents all in one signing. So they're seeing the speed and the accuracy that goes along with this service, because if you're signing that many documents, and oftentimes you have to initial each page, how many times has the realtor got down right to the end, we have a signed document, oh, but we're missing an initial on this page or this page. So this type of technology allows those types of errors and time savings to be had, or errors to be not to be had, and time savings to be had. But we're seeing it basically start to finish on the transaction. They're signing absolutely everything these days.
That's great. Ken, are you saying the same thing in your DocuSign space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we are moving rapidly from the early adopter stage into the mainstream, as you can see, and I think that's what we've been talking about here over the last year and a half, 2 years, where you know, folks have put dipped their toes in the water and have decided to try it, and now it's become one of those advantages that you really can't pass up. And I think the recurring theme here just in the past 15 minutes has been pretty obvious, and that is that the consumers or the clients are demanding it. They expect to be able to do business this way. They expect to be able to have documents at their fingertips on the devices that they want to use and execute them the way they see fit. And so it really is moving from a choice to a must-have.
Gotcha. Well, that's great to hear. So hopefully everyone on the call has a system or is considering getting one if they don't. Okay, so let's get into kind of the meat of this now. Let's talk about just for those of us that are not lawyers, and which is most of us probably, and to just kind of give us a backdrop. You know, what made this whole thing possible? You know, just maybe give us a quick overview. What kind of legislation is now in place that makes this legally viable and legally acceptable all over the country now? I mean, that's if you can,
Sure,
you can answer that for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I wish I had like some exciting news to tell about it, but really most of it's pretty old. In fact, you know, real estate transactions have been enforced electronically even before the eSign Act or the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act were passed back in the late 90s and 2000. But in the last 13 years, of course, we've simply had more and more states refine and adopt and conform to the standard, which is the Federal eSign Act, which really is the 50-state baseline for electronic transactions. Those of you who are in states that may have attorneys telling you that you can't do electronic transactions in that state because they don't have Uniform Electronic Transactions Act or because of whatever, you should probably get a different lawyer because it is black letter law in all 50 states. You can do these transactions this way, and you know, it even includes, you know, many of the front-end disclosures and things like that, where there are downstream recipients who are very eager to have an electronic transaction that can be verified. And I think that's what we're going to get into. I mean, it's one thing to be compliant and to say, yes, it's legal to do an electronic transaction. The next shoe to drop, of course, is how do you do it? How do you ensure that you're taking full advantage of the electronic nature of the transaction to be more secure, more transparent, and more enforceable than paper?
Yeah, and you know, you brought up a good point just a minute ago. I mean, you might want to share that too about that. They're certainly one of the things that I've heard over the years why people have been concerned about electronic signatures is exactly that, some of the security or concerns that somehow someone might be able to work around the system. But maybe talk a little bit about just for all of those that may carry documents with them, the dangers of having paper documents with you. Why don't we just touch on that? That's kind of interesting.
That's an excellent point, Marilyn, and I think, you know, that's one thing. It's sort of a myth. It's like I don't want to go to the cloud because I'm worried about my customers' data. Actually, I think real estate agents and brokers are probably in a really tough spot right now because there's been so much emphasis on security of personal information, and I think it's lost on some folks that includes paper information, that includes credit card information, that includes any kind of personal identifiable information that you may be carrying with you in the back seat of your car, under your desk at home, unsecured in file drawers in your office. All those things are subject to scrutiny, and that's why we're finding, and I think Again, this explains why we've had so much adoption in the last couple of years. People are recognizing that it's actually safer to take that data, store it in a place with a company that actually knows how to store data and has actually been third-party certified to be able to store data in a secure manner, so that they can tell their clients that they're taking care of their information.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of counterintuitive, I think, for those of us that grew up in paper, but it is important for us to remember that. You know, things can happen. Your car can get broken into, or your house can get broken into, or, you know, there's a lot of different ways in which we can put ourselves at risk. So
Marilyn, if I may interject, this is Russ.
Sure.
And also remember, the fact is that over the past, I don't know, since it was invented, we've been doing transactions via fax.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that is probably the least secure device out there for transmitting all this information. So I think that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why digital signatures are even more easily accepted these days, because of the improvement over fax machines and hard copies.
Fax machines with paper falling all over the floor. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, just to add to that, if you don't mind, risk mitigation. When you go to sign your documents and the documents are locked and the data is sealed and the data is protected, we saw this especially in the Florida market. I mean, when a hurricane comes through and people had paper documents, they had their repositories wiped away. Well, then they went back to it 3 years later, another hurricane came through and they had their documents wiped away again. So when you start to adopt technologies like this, it not only means that you have the security of your document being legal, but also it's being protected online at multiple sources. So from a risk mitigation standpoint, there are huge upsides to it.
That's a very good point. We've had so many natural disasters in the last few years. That's a really good point. So one of the things that we're actually going to share with the viewers at the end is a document that Bank of America has published. And what we're seeing now, and you guys can maybe talk to this a little bit, is that many of the larger banks are providing requirements or strong recommendations as to the types of electronic signatures or the types of support that electronic signature program must have in order to be legally viable within their programs. And Bank of America, has, like I say, has published one, which we'll send. There'll be a link we can send to all of you at the end of this, so you can take a look at that. But I'm wondering, maybe Ken, if you could start with us and just kind of give us a quick overview of what you see in that Bank of America requirement and the kinds of things that that our listeners should be able to, or should look for when they're starting to choose their solutions or when they're looking at their own solutions.
Sure. Yeah, I think what we're seeing with Bank of America, and it's very encouraging, is a sophistication in the types of inquiries that are being made. I think, you know, as recently as 5 years ago, the banks are saying, we don't know anything about these e-signature things, and therefore we don't accept them. And they've rapidly come around to saying, okay, we understand that this is here to stay. We understand that this is inevitable. Now let's ask the right questions, which are, what are we getting when we receive from a third party an electronically signed document? It's one thing for the parties to decide to execute a contract or other addenda electronically, but if there are third parties relying on that transaction in order to fund or to take risks, they want to know where it came from when they get that physical specimen. And so as a result of that, they have been requesting what we call a certificate of completion, or a summary of the transaction that can be delivered to them that demonstrates the kind of authentication and identification procedures that were done, what happened to the document, some time stamping, certain evidentiary bits around the transaction that will support it if it is ever challenged. But I think most of what you're going to see in those requirements, I'm sure other banks are going to be coming out with similar requirements, is that there's some documented method of determining how that document got to be in the condition that it's in, and that tells the story around the transaction. Note that there is no such requirement on paper, and I think the cat is out of the bag on that one. I think that there's, after 2008, the scrutiny around the fraudulent paper transactions that were going on, I think, is really increasing scrutiny on paper as well. The great thing about electronic is that all the parties have total transparency into that conversation or into that transaction, and it's much more amenable to having standards placed upon it, such as the Bank of America standards. They're not hard to meet if you use a reputable vendor who's going to give you an audit trail, who's going to give you authentication options to be able to meet those requirements, and gives you a document that is what we would call self-proving. In other words, it's digitally signed so that it is tamper evident and that the history goes along with the document.
Gotcha. And Martin, when apparently Fannie Mae is doing something similar as well, right? Are there any other elements that people should consider, or what's your perspective on all of the requirements that we're now seeing from banks and groups like that?
Well, I agree with what Ken was saying. I think you'll see pretty much every financial institution in the future move towards a standard in terms of what they expect to see for the signatures. In the past, they wouldn't accept them, period, and they were still accepting fax technology, which to me just always seemed baffled when they look at how secure is a fax with a signature as opposed to receiving an audit trail with a built-in history and a document that's digitally sealed that shows whether it's been tampered with, with a complete audit trail of who accessed it, what IP address. All of this is built in, but they would still take a fax. So when Fannie Mae, with their home base, they're accepting the documents now. Back, I think it was 2009, FHA started to accept it, and more government agencies. I think the tipping point has come, and I think also when they're starting to look for efficiencies from the government side, this is a huge way that they can become much more efficient and save a lot of money. I know they're doing it on the electronic medical side, and I think you'll start to see it come through on the housing side.
Gotcha. So this is not going away. This is getting more and more popular, and it's I know even as long as a couple of years ago, I remember talking to agents who were very frustrated because they wanted to use electronic signatures, and then the particular bank they were working with wouldn't take them, or it was an REO, so they wouldn't take them, but they take them on a regular transaction. Are there any rules now even with Bank of America? Are there certain types of transactions, or certain types of documents that they will accept and still not, or is it pretty universal now?
This is Ken. Actually, the guidelines that Bank of America came out with are specific to REO and short sales and deed in lieu. Okay. So that was really kind of the stumbling point during 2010, 2011. I think the majority of deals out there were all short sales, and those are very, as your agents know out there in the audience, those are very paperwork intensive. They have a lot of third parties that need to buy off on it. Some third parties aren't very willing to buy off on transactions, and they all want to do things their own way. And I think there is a recognition among those major lenders and those folks that have all that inventory are saying, look, we have to find a way to manage this electronically. And Fannie's most recent guidance is the same way. It came out and said, look, we have to accept electronic signatures for offers for our bank-owned properties, and therefore they put out their guidance for it at the beginning of this past year.
Gotcha. Okay, good. Well, I'm encouraged as a homeowner and a home buyer and seller that they're trying to make it easier for all of us, so that's great. Let's just switch gears a little bit now. So a couple days ago, in preparation for this webinar, I went on to my iPad and I went to the App Store and I typed in electronic signature, and I saw a myriad of different solutions out there, many of which are free or $1.99 or the usual model that we see in the App Store. And first of all, it was very kind of overwhelming to me. It's just thinking about which one would I choose. But I guess a question for both of you, maybe we can start with you on this one, Ken, is are all of those legally viable, or are there ways for people to simply look at them to know if they are, or what do they do with all of that stuff that's out there now? It's just kind of crazy. There's so many different people doing it. So I'll just throw that to you and see what tell us what you think.
Well, first of all, I like the way you worded the question. Are they legally viable? Because are they legal? Probably. But it really doesn't matter if they're legal if you can't enforce them. Right. And again, we're in an industry here in real estate. DocuSign's in many different industries, and real estate probably is the one where deals blow up more often than any other kind. Sure. Buyers get cold feet. People want to repudiate for whatever reason that they can come up with. So having an enforceable contract is important if you want to really hold them to it. And you know, the elements that we just cited, this is what the major lenders were facing in other industries, basically saying, look, we want to know where this electronic signature came from. It's one thing to be electronic signature. We're not going to fight you on that, but is it the signature of the client? How do we know? Is there document integrity? So the most important thing, two most important things, I think, from a legal standpoint are identification and authentication. So how do you match the person with the signature? And then data integrity. Once the document's signed, can you demonstrate that it has not been tampered with or changed? Those are the two things that are most important, I think, in terms of what you would call legal viability. And so if you look at those free apps out there, you have no idea what their, I don't know what their approach is to data integrity. I don't know how whether they've been third-party certified to have trust centers and you know, no third-party tampering of ability. I don't know if they've got digital seals on their documents. Who knows how they get the signature image onto the document? We don't know. So it takes a little bit of scrutiny, I think, to make that.
I guess just speaking like an agent or like a consumer, I guess what kind of scared me when I looked at them, like I say, they all kind of looked alike, so I didn't really know, and I didn't know what questions to ask. And in an app environment, I can't ask it even if I wanted to. So what I hear you guys talking about, and of course you're a lawyer, so you're going to always protect us, or try to, is that these kinds of decisions can't be made lightly, because we're talking about the legality of our industry, and we're talking about protecting clients against future problems or claims and things like that. So it sounds like to me that you have to work with someone that you can talk to minimally to ask these questions about. But that's just where I sit from.
I totally support that, but even if you want to do your own research online, if the vendor that you're looking at does not speak to, satisfactorily to authentication and data integrity, I would keep looking.
Okay, gotcha.
And really, rather than speaking to it just on a website, they need to be speaking to it from the perspective of having a third-party certification, have someone vouch for you. And again, you will probably run into trouble with downstream acceptance if you don't choose wisely.
Okay. So, you know, we're talking here. Go ahead, Russ.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
The way I kind of look at that, you know, not being the lawyer, is a little more simplistic, but I try to make the differentiation between e-signature and digital signature.
Okay.
To me, the digital signature comes with those protections that we've been talking about, whereas e-signature, you know, that just captures a facsimile of your signature and doesn't really offer the same protections and authentications that we've been talking about.
That's interesting. That's a good differentiation. So I thought it might be helpful for us to actually, and those on the call, to actually see what we're talking about, because legally protectable and audit trails and all this stuff sounds really good, but if you don't really know what that looks like, it's kind of hard for the rest of us to figure out what that is. So we've asked DocuSign, and Instantup's going to comment along the way as well about their process, but we've asked them to kind of show us what it looks like. So maybe if I can turn that over to you, Tom, he's going to kind of walk us through some examples of what a program that's been done appropriately versus those that have been tampered with, so we can see the difference, because it's just hard to tell if you haven't seen it. So I'll turn it over to you, Tom, and take it away.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think, you know, this can be confusing when you just listen to people talk about it, you know, but I think if you kind of, when you kind of see what it looks like and what you want to look for in a document that you could trust, it's pretty obvious. So I have a couple files on the screen here, and I'll just kind of roll through them and show you what they look like and show you how they've been secured. The first one I'll open is a Word document. It's just a simple Word document. Obviously, in Word, you can select anything you want, make changes, right? That, you know, you could paste an image of a signature in here. You could email this Word document to somebody and say, see, I signed this, and it's all good, right? And most people would say, well, no, I'm not going to accept that, because you could easily change that. So that's why people don't use, you know, editing tools like Word to secure a contract. They might turn it into a PDF. So here I'm looking at that same document that's been saved as a PDF, and people can, a lot of people will say, well, that's secure because it's a PDF. It's been put in a way that you can just look at it. You can't edit it. But unfortunately, that's actually not the case either. It's very easy in lots of PDF tools to come in and edit this text. Right? So I can come in and edit this text just like I could that Word document. So because it's so easy to edit this PDF, if I were to make changes to this and send it to you, you wouldn't be able to tell if this was the real version or not the real version. Because there's nothing here to indicate that this is the original version. There's nothing saying this is the master copy or anything. It's not a secure file.
Right. Gotcha.
So I'm going to flip over to another document. I'll open this one. I'll open this one in a different PDF viewer.
Okay.
And this is a document that's actually been secured. And right off the bat, you can see at the top, it says signed and all signatures are valid. There's an indicator that wraps the entire document. It says this document has been actually signed. It's been secured. If you open the panel to the side, you can see that it's been signed. There's a valid signature. Document has not been modified, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this indicator that wraps around the PDF file that tells you that this is the original document. So what if someone were to change this file? Well,
let me just stop you there for a second, Tom.
Yep.
So Martin, in your system, just so we want you guys to know that there's lots of people that are doing this the right way. Do you get a similar type of reassurance when you look in at an AuthentiSign sign inside of Instinet?
Exactly that. Yeah, we use very, very similar technologies where you get the banner on top of the document that shows that the document has been digitally signed and certified. And again, you can open up the signature panel. One thing that we also add is just in the bookmarks, we embed the history of the documents with that in there. But the important part here is exactly what they're saying. Every time you open that document, the validity and verification check is performed. So it's not something that's just done once. Anytime it's opened by any party that it's sent to at any time now or in the future, it will be checked for its validity, which is very important.
And then when it's stored, so let's say that a brokerage created files and they used a document management system, or even they just stored these files, for years, would they still see this if they opened this 5 years from now? If there was a conflict when the home was being sold or something, would they still be able to keep all of that?
100%. And the other thing that's built in is it's time-stamped. And it's time-stamped not by our servers. It's time-stamped by an independent third party. We use GlobalSign with Adobe. We've used GeoTrust in the past. There's other third parties that you could use. So we're saying don't trust us on the content or the validity of the document. We go to trusted third parties out there, security companies along with Adobe, to lock our document. That doesn't mean it has to be used in the Adobe Reader. If you were to use the Nitro Reader or other free readers that are out there, they'll check the validity of the document also. Gotcha.
And it sounds like you do the same thing at DocuSign. Is that right, Tom, where you use third parties as well to make sure that this is all legitimate?
Yeah, this is one element of security, and the good news about this is that it's an industry standard, so nobody owns it. So anybody who wants to secure a document that is going to be sent to somebody else for them to rely on can use this technology to make this record tamper evident. And so it's one aspect. There are clearly lots of other things in a platform you look for, but this one is sort of table stakes. Because you want to make sure that and I think the reason banks like the Bank of America and other banks have the stance that they want their records to be self-reliant is that they want to store these documents in their own system for years, like you mentioned, and then not have to worry later when they open them up, do I have to rely on somebody who may not be around anymore? I just want to rely on the document I have. So this allows them to do that.
Exactly. If I change the remote aspect of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Keep going. Sorry.
Here. Just wanted to help people understand that this is something that you can get from many vendors, not just from one or others.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So in this case, I actually did modify the agreement. It's actually fairly hard to do once it's been digitally signed. It's hard to find what I would call, misbehaved software that allows you to actually tamper with digitally signed documents. But in this case, I found one, and you can see right away, anytime anybody sends me a document and says, I want you to rely on this document, the first thing I do is look up in this corner, and I see, what does it say? And if it says signed and all signatures are valid, or it says there's a digital signature and it's been verified, I feel good. I can now look at the document and believe I can rely on it. In this case, it's saying at least one signature is invalid because it's something's been changed. And if I were to look at this, it's actually going to tell me, oh, there's page one's been modified, an annotation was created. You can see there's the annotation. But even beyond that, because it's a self-reliant document, it says, hey, here's the document before it had been modified. Click to view this version. And so inside this file is another copy, which is the original copy that was not modified. And as you can see, now it's showing me the one that doesn't have the one marked out and the two marked out. So this is a perfect example of a document that can live on its own, outside of the DocuSign platform and prove itself to be reliable.
And Russ, when you were looking at systems, wasn't that one of the things you thought was really important to have version control like that?
Absolutely, yes. Yep. That's versioning. And first thing we obviously look at is that whatever system meets all federal and state requirements, and then obviously preventing the documents from being altered once digitally signed, or at least flagging them so that you know if it has been altered. And versioning is huge. Obviously, in a real estate transaction, you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So you want to track every time somebody signs off on something.
Gotcha. And just for the audience, if any of you have any questions that you'd like to ask the group, feel free to send them over, because we're going to start questions in just a few minutes. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tom.
Yeah, so this last example is a document that somebody sent me and say, hey, you should rely on this document. And the first thing I do is I look on the screen and I see there's no signature indicators. There's nothing telling me that it's been sealed. So I would have a hard time relying on this document. As a matter of fact, I feel like I could come in and maybe edit this one too. So I could come in here and say, I want to make this $2 million.
Oh boy.
Yeah, there's a world.
And believe me, if I send you this file, you will have no idea I made those changes, right? No way to tell.
Wow, that's scary.
You just can't rely on a record like this unless it has that seal. Like I said, this is one aspect of the security of the system, but it's an important one.
And just to go along with that, in order to get the ability to digitally sign the documents like they do and what we do in our system, you have to go through a quite robust vetting of number one, getting the ability to do it, and then they go through to verify. The security company does a complete vetting process in terms of how it's going to be used, who's using it, whether it's a departmental level, whether it's a company level, and such. So that is the extra layer of security. They don't hand out the ability to provide these types of digital signatures to anybody. So that's one extra layer on top, that we would not be able to go and produce secure documents like this without having been vetted to prove who we are for our identity and the use that we're going to have with these documents.
Interesting. So both of you have had to go through a process where they made sure that you were going to be handling the technologies appropriately, that was going to make it safe for people using it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, too, we sell, we have a lot of customers in real estate, but DocuSign also provides services to pretty much every other vertical market out there, insurance, banking, et cetera. We have about 40 million identities in our network. We add about 75, 80,000 new, identities a day. Those all have to be secured. And as we sit down and talk to Fidelity, for example, or the Bank of America or Microsoft or Cisco or any of these big companies, number one requirement is make sure that you're creating a reliable electronic records. Make sure that your internal processes can't be tampered with. So there are certifications, ISO 27001. There's a number of certifications we've had to go through in order to provide this sort of enterprise class security. But to your point about the Apple Store, apps, or the Android Store apps, there's a million of them in there. We have an app in the Apple Store too, and it doesn't cost anything. It's called DocuSign Inc. It doesn't allow you to send documents to other people for signature, but it easily allows you to sign them. And even in that app, we digitally seal the document because it's, we really believe that no matter what, you have to rely on the record. And it's very easy to tell if you're looking at these different tools if it's creating a reliable record. If it's not digitally sealing it, it's a pretty good indicator that they might not be doing something that you could rely on. If you go to their website and they don't have something we would call a trust center, something that talks about, their servers, are they up and down, what's their uptime, how do they deal with your data, what different certifications do they have, then they might not be in the business of protecting your information. Because there are people out there who are in the business of gathering information and actually selling it to advertisers. This is clearly not the kind of information you'd want to be putting out.
Yeah, that's the one thing also to look at is not only just the protection of the data, to protect the data for its validity, but also you want to be able to protect, number one, the consumer's data so it's not being sold to third parties, because big data is a big business. And you can imagine the type of information that is in these documents that could be sold, or if you're putting it into the system, what's the terms of service, what's the privacy policy, with regards to the service overall, let alone the security that's on top of the documents. You should know how the information is going to be used. You should also know how it's going to be stored, and you should also know the ownership and who takes ownership or lack thereof ownership when you're using a system. You also, just from an end user standpoint, you want to be protected that you're not liable for the company that you're going to be using. There's a world of different products out there, and like you're saying, there's secondary monetary models that are built on the use of information that's input to these systems. So it's pretty scary, and the last thing we want to see is the consumer lose faith in an industry that's growing exponentially right now, and it's helping out everybody from the consumer to the realtor and everybody. So it's something where, do your homework, check out the products, check out your services, the security, and check out your policies.
Well, and I think to add to that, we at DocuSign think it's very important to be communicating this information to people in real estate, but also we talk the same way with people in mortgage and insurance and any other industry, to really make sure that the systems you choose are creating these legally reliable documents that will provide a very low risk that someone can actually, tamper with them, or a low risk that when you go to court, your documents will be rejected. Because what will happen, someone is going to use some bozo sign application that they get somewhere that doesn't create a secure document, doesn't have an audit trail, doesn't have a consumer consent, doesn't do the things they should be to actually be creating a reliable electronic record. They're going to go to court, and they're not going to win. The courts are going to reject the document because it can't be proven as authentic, or can't be proven as something that should be admissible, or something. And the news at that point is not going to say bozo sign is making electronic records not good. They're going to say electronic records might not be valid, which is going to hurt everybody in the industry. So it's really important that people are looking out for themselves, and it's why we're being a little bit vocal on it, because there's a bunch of folks starting little companies that are saying they're doing this, and they're really not.
Gotcha. Well, we're getting some really interesting questions now. I'm sorry, go ahead, Martin, finish, and then we'll
just to go along with that, we look at it as, again, so say you use bozo sign and the deal went sour, and then the validity gets called in. They're not going to be looking at a bozo sign. They're going to be looking at the realtor community from our aspect. That's where we predominantly live. We don't want to see the realtor community get blamed or lose the consumer's confidence in using these technologies because one bad player, or there's other, insecure or, bad systems that are out there. It's a big concern for us, because at the end of the day, it's the realtors that are going to get hurt, and that's the last thing we want to see.
Exactly. Well, let's go to some questions.
May I add to that,
go ahead, Russ. Sure.
Just real quickly, is if you get into that that spitting contest from a legal aspect, chances are real good bozo is not going to show up in court to help you. You want to be working with legitimate people like DocuSign and Internet. So.
Okay, so there's one question that I think you guys might have touched on, but it's a good one. So what happens in the event that a company, like one of your companies, for example, that's storing the documents goes out of business? What happens to all of the records? Maybe, Martin, you want to answer that one first, and then you can go to it, Ken or Tom?
Well, sure. The one thing that we do contractually is we do say that we will keep the documents for a legal retention period, because we do that also from our form side and our doc management. So whatever the state requirements are for each area, we keep that in there. But as a rule, we've never removed a document from our system. So even we've gone way past what the retention periods are.
Okay, DocuSign?
Sure. So we actually have our system geared to maintain the document retention and destruction policies of our customers. We have some regulated customers that require removal of documents. We keep the records of the transactions without keeping the documents in the cases where people want them destroyed. I think the main question was, though, how do I, if something happens and the e-signature vendor that I choose evaporates into thin air and I'm left with nothing but these physical artifacts of the transaction, what can I do with them? I think we talked about that earlier today, where we kind of give you the ability to self-help. You know, I came to this company 7 years ago and with the expectation I'd be in court every couple of weeks standing up and trying to, you know, test the veracity of DocuSign documents, especially in real estate, and I'm still waiting for that first day in court. I'm sort of disappointed at that, but DocuSign isn't.
I bet.
I really think that's because, I mean, obviously there are disputes, and obviously there are people trying to get out of contracts, and they will. All I know is that if the signature and the veracity of the signature and the method by which the signature was obtained was at the center of the dispute, I would be there. And we haven't had it yet. And so I believe that's because we give the certificate of completion and the document at the end of the transaction, and those things are exportable out of the system, digitally signed and tamper evident, so that they can be taken to court with a clean chain of custody and used as result.
Yeah, I mean, you could take the documents out of the system.
Yeah.
Store them in your computer.
Exactly. And we apply the same digital signature and on the certificate with the information. So we certify both and sign both of them, so they both have that tamper-proof seal on them, so they can live outside of our system forever.
Gotcha. So that's the answer. They live outside of your system. Your system isn't really, I mean, it's important, obviously, but it's not dependent on it. They can still have the protected documents years after, if you guys decided to not to sell bananas and not do electronic signatures anymore.
Well, a lot of our customers actually do both, right? They store their documents in their own system behind a firewall, and they maintain them in the DocuSign system. Sort of built.
That makes sense. So it gives you a backup. So kind of along the same lines, there's a question: are these systems dependent upon Adobe software? And if so, what would happen if Adobe went away?
No, not at all. The PDF document format was made an official ISO standard a few years ago. Adobe kind of spun that out into the general realm. We do not use Adobe tools. We're PDF. We started doing forms 25 years ago. We consider ourselves pretty much PDF experts for creating, maintaining documents, because we have a form aspect, but you don't have to use anything, any tool, any development kit, any viewer that has anything to do with Acrobat. There's a number of free viewers out there. We've seen a few today. And there's also a number of tools, quite a huge number of tools in order to help create the secure documents that we have, and none of them are really associated. The only thing that we use from Adobe is that digital signature that we apply. We do that in a partnership with GlobalSign, who is our security provider.
Okay, so it's not Adobe dependent, to answer the question.
Not at all.
They're just they started the PDF, but they've made it publicly usable.
Well, and really the industry forced that, right? The industry
well, I would guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. So here's one that's interesting too. So is this usable if some of the parties are using digital signatures and others are not? So in other words, once the non-users print, sign, and scan it back in, can it be incorporated back into the digital software? So I may sign it electronically, but for whatever reason my client doesn't want to, or the person on the other side of the transaction doesn't want to. They print it and they sign it. Can this process still work? Can you explain how that would work? Maybe Tom or Ken, start with you this time.
Sure, I can take a crack at that. I mean, clearly, when you export a document out of the system for the intentions of signing it or filling in a form, you lose some control. So when a document is outside the system and someone's actually, for the purpose of signing it, you lose some control. The way our process would work, for example, is If someone decided they wanted to sign it with ink, there's an option you can enable that will allow them to print it out, sign it, and either fax it back or scan it back into the envelope.
Okay.
And what will happen in our audit trail is we'll say, signer 2 opted not to sign electronically. They actually exported this record down to their computer. They signed it by hand, and then they put it back into the envelope. We'll still digitally seal the envelope for any changes afterwards, but there will be a mention in the audit trail that this was actually signed by hand. So most of our customers disable that because they don't want someone exporting this document out of the system, out of the controlled space in order to fill it in.
But even
so once you've gotten
Marilyn,
the control, yeah, go ahead. Yes?
Yeah, Ken, even if they do, Marilyn, I mean, remember, we're comparing this to a paper process and faxing, right? So is there something magical that happens by exporting it from the system and that removes its legal efficacy? No. It is just, there's evidentiary things going on there that you're collecting, and frankly, the act of capturing that someone exported a contract and then imported it back into the system via fax or scan is actually very strong evidence as well of parties' intent and their identity. And plus, we have now a scribble on a piece of paper that's appended to the document as well. So again, far superior to doing it the old-fashioned way. It's just more complicated to demonstrate that chain of custody.
Gotcha. Here's another question along the paper issue. So when you just showed us online how it's really easy to see that something is valid or that something is invalid. But how do you determine if a document is authenticated and has maintained its integrity if you're viewing a paper version? So in other words, when someone prints it out, does some of that authentication come with it, and is it shown when it gets printed?
Yeah, that's exactly what we talked about when we were talking about the Bank of America standards and how third parties were trying to come up with some way of determining how those documents got in that condition. Is that they want some other document that comes along with it that at least describes the history of how that document got that way. And again, Instinet and DocuSign both have ways of doing that. We do that through our certificate of completion, which is a brief history of the who, what, when, and where.
Gotcha.
And on top of that, there has to be some tieback to the system, so we actually have the ability to do a lockup. You can take the information off of that paper document and actually go and verify that it actually has been executed on DocuSign.
Gotcha.
Correct. We have the same.
So here is one. If the deal changes after it's been signed, an example, a PIN number is wrongly stated, how can that be corrected or even a warranty added? Martin, you want to take that one?
What's the scenario?
So the program's been signed, the documents are all done, but then something changes in the deal. How do you deal with that? Do you just
There's different ways of doing it.
Okay.
It could be adding a new document or starting over again and just using the secondary document and just putting them together. You can include the previously signed documents and add a new document to it and start basically a new signing process. So there's a number of different ways to facilitate it. It's really what the ease of use is for the end user.
Gotcha. Okay. Here's a couple of, it sounds like some frustrations that people are having, that even though the Bank of America standards are out there, and they've been out there for quite a while from my understanding, one person had an issue less than a month ago with B of A, refused documents with eSignature, and they had to go back and re-sign. Do you think is that it hasn't worked its way through the whole Bank of America system yet, or any perspective on why they might have had that problem?
Well, this is Ken, and I think I've been on the kind of the bleeding edge of this issue for a number of years now, and really, it's webinars like this. We've got 300 or so people on this webinar who are now empowered with the correct information to basically tell their bank that they're wrong. That the Bank of America is a big place, and there are many people who didn't get the memo. And being able to push back a little bit on that, using those sales skills, those persuasive skills, to say, look, I know you guys accept electronic signatures. I know that a DocuSign signature meets your requirements. So let's keep this deal moving through.
Gotcha. So, and we are going to, as I mentioned earlier, there's a link in here that we can show you in a minute, and we're also going to send it to you all as a thank you for coming to the panel. There'll be a link to the Bank of America standards that you could print and probably walk into that particular mortgage officer and say, well, what are you talking about? Here's the document for your company. Please make this happen for us. We're also going to be showing you some other things. That NAR's put together a whole field guide of things to help realtors with this issue, so we'll give you as many pieces of information as we can to help you. And after the call, too, also, we're going to send you a checklist that you could actually take if you were going to be making a decision or looking at a tool that you can use when you're in the conversation. So that is it. We're at 11 o'clock. I thank you very much for all of your time and attention. And again, if there's any questions or either, maybe you could skip quickly to, well, actually, we'll send it to you. It'll be easier. But just if you could click to not one more slide kind of on the document. I mean, I can just show the people that are available. So there's going to be 3 things you'll get: the NAR Field Guide, the Bank of America Electronic Signatures Reference Guide, and also a white paper that NAR published a couple years ago that talks about what you need to know about eSign and document security, along with the checklist that Instinet and DocuSign have collaborated on to provide you with the kinds of things that they know are what will really help protect you and your clients in the future. So thank you so much. If anyone has any follow-up or questions for WAVE Group, feel free to email me at Marilyn, M-A-R-I-L-Y-N, at WAVGroup, W-A-V-Group.com. And other than that, I thank you very much for your time. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.